Jeffrey Epstein wanted to have a lot of kids. I know, that sounds like Duggar territory, but it wasn't a family he was after. He wanted to breed the next generation of genius kids with his own DNA. He didn't want to be a father. He wanted to be a creator, and he had a plan to make it happen. Welcome to Darling, It's Dark. Epstein purchased the property in '93 from the family of former New Mexico Governor Bruce King in Stanley, New Mexico, just 30 miles south of Santa Fe. The property is pretty massive, about 10,000 acres. Now, when Epstein bought the property, it was just land. There were no existing structures, and it didn't have a name. There are a few theories on where the name came from, but the one that holds the most value is that the name was a nod to the fictional character Zorro, who wears a mask to hide his identity. If this is true, then Zorro Ranch is the second property Epstein owned with masks. The property on Little St. James had a room of masks. We covered that property in our last video. I'll put the link below if you want to check that out too. But given what we know now, the character Zorro theory checks out. Now, what Epstein built wasn't just a house. This was a 26,700 square foot hilltop mansion with guest houses. But that's not all. He had a private runway with its own airplane hangar. I'm sure to help his trafficking efforts and for the privacy of his guests, no doubt. And huge gardens. But some of the more out there features were a fire station with an actual fire truck and tanker, and a small western town on the property. Now, I couldn't find any videos, and when you look online, the pictures that pop up are from a movie set. So what Epstein's town looked like isn't clear. But Virginia Giuffre, a victim who had been at the ranch, called it an opulent amusement park. Now, within the confines of the property, we know Zorro Ranch was a massive, isolated hub for trafficking. Survivors like Virginia Giuffre and Maria Farmer have testified that they were flown to the ranch and abused there. Maria even claimed there were cameras hidden everywhere, in the walls and the ceilings, to monitor everything. But as if sex trafficking wasn't bad enough, it gets worse. New Mexico Representative Andrea Romero told Daily Mail, and this is a direct quote, "We have people coming forward saying they were drugged, had sex organs and sperm harvested from their bodies, and woke up around medical equipment, not knowing where they were or what happened to them." Like, I have no words for that. And as if it couldn't get any worse, that's not even the craziest part. In July of 2019, a New York Times article was released saying that Epstein's goals for the ranch exceeded his usual level of creep and hit new heights with his desire to seed the human race with his DNA. He told scientists and academics that he wanted to use Zorro Ranch as a base where he will impregnate around 20 women to breed the next generation of geniuses. I can't with this guy, seriously. And this wasn't a new plan of his, nor was it a secret. He had been talking about it since the early 2000s, and under the promise of funding, several scientists were looped in. Evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould and geneticist George M. Church were just some of the few. But beyond littering the world with little Epsteins, he had a larger interest in eugenics, or transhumanism, which by definition is the science of improving the human population through technologies like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. Epstein was inspired by a sperm bank from the 80s called the Repository for Germinal Choice, where there was to be a stock of sperm from Nobel laureates to help create the next generation of genius kids. Needless to say, the idea never took off, and the place shut down in '99. And from what we can tell, neither did Epstein's. The scientists and other wealthy businessmen he wanted to support his plan didn't, to put it simply. From what we could tell in 2019 and even now, The official sources claim his eugenics plan never came to light, but there is evidence of sexual and psychological abuse, and there were pregnancies. We know of one for sure from the DOJ files. There was a diary of a girl between the ages of 16 and 17. I'll link the pages if you want to check them out. The diary has poems and cutouts from magazines, cards, as well as entries. She writes in a kind of zigzag pattern, but it's not difficult to crack, and there are translations in the file as well. I'm going to be honest with you. It's hard to look at. There are really no words to describe what she writes. I've never seen so much hopelessness from someone so young. She is a literal child, and the things she documents are horrifying. Rape, psychological abuse, physical and sexual abuse, and there are sonograms from multiple pregnancies. From what she writes, there was a birth, although the sex of the child is unknown. She does write about her screams, but there's no other context, so I'm not sure if she was her child or not, so we aren't sure. She then gets pregnant again, and pretty quickly after the last pregnancy from the sound of it, which did result in a miscarriage. Then she is pregnant a third time, which she calls this fetus Jeffrey. Now, in the next section of the journal, she writes, "I am so broken, and the procedure was so painful, and blood all over the sheets. I can't play this game anymore." She then talks about writing a fever after, and Ghislaine putting her in a cold shower. My take from this was an abortion, but she never explicitly says it, or she doesn't understand that is what was happening. She mentions hating Jeffrey throughout the journal, which, girl, me too. But other men are mentioned. Leon Black from Apollo Global is written multiple times as an abuser. And this is not speculation. She uses both his first and last name when mentioning him. Now, in her diary, she mentions several Epstein properties, like the island, Palm Beach, New York, but not the ranch. Although if you look, the journal pages, the magazine clippings, and cards look a bit older, like something from earlier 2000s, which actually line up with civil suits Leon Black's been involved in for rapes and sexual assault from around 20 years ago. The journal is redacted in some parts, but there is a mailing stamp with the date 2003. So this gives us an idea of when these events were happening and how they track with what we know now. And at different points, she gives hints that Epstein is the father. She refers to herself as a personal incubator to Epstein. She calls the fetus in the last pregnancy mentioned Jeffrey, but she doesn't explicitly say it, so for now, it's up to speculation. And it also makes me wonder how many other girls were there in the same situation? What happened to the baby she had? Was this a pre-trial for Epstein to then operate on a larger scale, like his eugenics plan for the ranch? But I think more so, it just solidified the fact that the operation he ran was global. The abuse, trafficking, God knows what else, didn't just happen in one place. But when it came to the ranch, the US government botched the job. Big time. While the FBI knew the property existed in 2019, they didn't search it like they did the New York mansion or the island. Wow. Not only does this sound fishy to me, but it did to the New Mexico Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia Richard. At this point, Epstein had committed his Great Vanishing Act, or died, and investigative efforts were slowing down. New Mexico continued to follow up with the FBI. It wasn't until January 2026 that the newly unsealed documents brought attention to what was happening at the property, including an email that was actually sent in 2019 to Eddie Aragon, a New Mexico radio host, who did forward the email to the FBI, in which the writer claims to have worked on the ranch, and that there are 2 foreign females buried on the property. But here's the thing. Time has without a doubt eroded evidence, and even worse, The property sold in 2023. It literally has new owners who have started making changes to the property. The failure to investigate Zorro Ranch back in 2019 is either a sign of incompetence of the FBI or an intentional act. And truthfully, I agree more with the latter. Fortunately, New Mexico has stepped up, and in February 2026, the New Mexico legislature approved a $2.5 million bipartisan truth commission and are searching the property, not the FBI. But like I mentioned, the compound was sold to Don Huffines in 2023, who renamed it Rancho de San Rafael. And if the Huffines name sounds familiar, he is currently in the running for Texas comptroller and was a former senator for the same state. His son Russell Huffines is in Trump's cabinet, but he didn't directly buy the property. Basically, it's not his name on the deed. The purchaser was technically San Rafael Ranch LLC, which is owned by both Don and his wife, and was formed a month before the sale. So what took so long to find out it's sold? It's pretty apparent the Huffines tried their best to keep the sale hush-hush, but they made a mistake. Or rather, they complained about the taxes. Due to the property being high profile at purchase, they requested the taxes be lowered. Of course, a millionaire would. Anyway, those tax documents were full of Don's wife, Mary Catherine's, signatures. The Santa Fe New Mexican ended up connecting the dots thanks to public tax records, which leads us to February 2026 and the forming of the Truth Commission. Don promises he will cooperate with the investigation, as well he should. But the thing is, he was already making renovations both inside and out, and without permits, which makes me wonder two things. One, how does someone who owns millions of dollars in property across Texas not get permits? And two, if there were active changes being made to the property, then evidence was most certainly destroyed, either intentionally or unintentionally. Although, what the former Zorro Ranch is going to become is even more mind-boggling. He's planning to turn this known trafficking hub where women suffered horrible abuse into a Christian retreat. Listen, I'm not against a Christian retreat at all, but the whole turning the darkness of Zorro Ranch into the light with something positive for the sake of the victims, which is the explanation Don's given, is ridiculous. It's either a marketing ploy, which is ironic considering the levels they've gone to hide the sale altogether, or they truly think this is a great idea. I'm not sure what to think, but there is a bit of speculation that the purchase was not at all random, and not as altruistic as the Huffines want everyone to believe. You see, Don is also the CEO of Hest Investments, which is short for Huffines Enterprises Science and Technology. In a nutshell, they are an investment firm that supports the science field, particularly advances in human health. In September of 2024, a $1.8 million investment was made from Hest to Secretome Therapeutics in Baltimore. The donation is being used in STM-01 therapy to treat heart disease, which is wonderful. What a great thing. Until you hear the treatment is made using specialized, high-potent stem cells derived from neonatal newborn heart tissue. So now we have a millionaire with connections to the US government, and is the owner of a place where there were plans to have babies. People claim reproductive procedures were done to them without their knowledge, was off limits to investigation for almost a decade, and we have a documented account of a girl's newborn being taken from her. And he is investing millions for a treatment using the stem cells from the hearts of newborns. Ultimately, it makes me question if this purchase was less about the victims and more about continuing to fund his investments. Only time will tell. But if there is a way we can honor those that were abused, trafficked, or lost their lives, remodeling a property to put a positive spin on it isn't the answer. Maybe the Huffines' only crime is being tone deaf to the whole situation. The victims truly fought for their lives every day. And I think it's not a truth everyone is willing to accept. Virginia Giuffre, who I mentioned earlier, was a key figure in advocating for criminal charges against Epstein and his crew of abusers. She provided authorities key information that helped convict Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as aiding other investigations. She inspired many to speak against their abusers and wrote a book about her experience with Epstein titled Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, which was released in October 2025. Unfortunately, Virginia took her own life in April of the same year, so she never saw the book's release. And then I keep thinking about the diary and what that young woman went through. I can't even fathom. I remember being 16 felt hard enough as it was without Epstein in my life. And those are not even a fraction of the victims we know exist. I need to say this video was hard to write. I spent a long time just scrolling through the diary pages, just imagining the pain this child felt. I wondered where she was today. Did she survive? Would she be okay with me reading her most private thoughts? It made me want to stop the script altogether. But then I had this sudden spark of encouragement. Maybe it was religious. Maybe it was my Lexapro kicking in. But if they were brave enough to tell their story, then my sharing is how we move forward. We can't change the past, but hopefully we can inspire future victims to speak out for the justice they deserve. And thank you so much for joining me for today's video. What's your take on Zorro Ranch? Do you think they'll find much evidence since so much time has passed and changes to the property have been made? Or what do you want to hear about next? Let me know in the comments. I love a one-way trip down the rabbit hole. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more dark videos. It really helps keep things running. Thanks again for watching. See you soon.